we're going to talk about 8.9 solid waste disposal. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe solid waste disposal methods and describe the effects of solid waste disposal methods. We're going to do this by first defining what solid waste is, and then look at a few different disposal methods such as sanitary landfills, incineration, and ocean dumping. So when we talk about solid waste disposal, we're talking about the waste which is not a liquid and is not a gas. It's basically what you'd consider your everyday trash and garbage. So you're also going to see the word municipal, which refers to like the city or the town. So this is the garbage and the trash produced by your town. So just dumping trash and garbage leads to several different concerns. One of them is fires in these open dumps. They're visually unappealing. They're often very odorous. There can be blowing trash, which leaves the area that you dumped your trash and comes into other areas. There can be vermin, which are pests that can cause diseases. And we know that dumps are huge sources of methane and can lead to groundwater contamination. So let's look at the last two in particular, the methane and the leachate, which is the groundwater contamination. So methane is an issue for landfills and unregulated dumps because the process inside of breaking down the trash can become anaerobic when there's no longer any oxygen in the center. So as a byproduct of the bacteria breaking down the trash and the garbage, it releases CH4. In the US, this accounts for 16% of our methane emissions. So this is an issue for us. We know that methane is a greenhouse gas, so putting more methane in the atmosphere is definitely a concern. On the other hand, another concern is what's called leachate, which leads to the groundwater contamination. And this is the single biggest issue facing solid waste disposal. So with leachate, we have all of these little red particles, and we're going to consider those to be the pollutants that are trapped within the garbage. So it could be from hazardous waste. It could just be as a natural byproduct of the trash being broken down. So all of these pollutants are in our landfill site. When it rains, the water droplets capture these pollutants and take them down into the groundwater. And this can lead to a lot of groundwater contamination. So to combat these, we've created what's called a sanitary landfill. So this is not just a place you dump your trash, it's a place where the trash is very well managed. So some important features of a sanitary landfill is having a portable fence to catch the windblown debris. So instead of it just blowing all throughout your forest, you're going to put up a fence to capture any loose garbage. We also have some other important features, such as these layers of compacted clay and high-density plastic to protect the groundwater. So we know from Unit 4, where we talked about soils, that clay is not permeable, so it's not going to let that water through. It's going to act as a barrier. So we have that going all the way around our landfill. A couple of other important things is we've got a drainage grid to capture the leachate to keep it from getting into the clay and then trying to make its way down into the groundwater. So these pipes are going to capture that leachate and take it to another location. We also have pipes to collect methane. So as I said, 16% of our methane emissions come from landfills. So this methane is eventually, a few things can happen to it. But for the most part, the methane can be collected and transported somewhere else. So that's what that pipe is doing. And it can be used to make steam and generate electricity. So we can use, just like you would for natural gas, we can use the captured methane, we can reclaim that from the landfill and recycle that into energy. You're also going to notice that it kind of looks like a layer cake, but it's a garbage cake. So they push the trash into place, and then daily it gets covered up with soil. So this reduces vermin and reduces odors. So you can see it makes like little layers, like a 7-layer cake of garbage. So if we remember, these are the issues facing garbage disposal. So we see that there is a way to deal with odor. They're less visually unappealing, so that's mostly taken away. The trash can't blow away because of the fence. It's covered, so there should be no fires. We should reduce the vermin by covering it. The methane is trapped, and the groundwater contamination is dealt with the pipes and with the layers of compacted clay and the high-density plastic. So we put a variety of things in our landfills. Things take from as little as 2 weeks of simple train tickets made of paper, all the way up to 450 years to more for plastic bottles. So this is a breakdown in 2015, but not much has changed, of the total municipal solid waste, MSW, municipal solid waste, generated in the United States by the different types of waste. And we can see here that paper is our greatest source of municipal solid waste, followed closely by yard trimmings and food waste. So what's interesting is these are things we can deal with, so we should be able to make a pretty big impact in our overall waste production. One thing which is typically difficult to deal with are tires. You cannot just send these, in most states, to your regular old landfill and be done with them, because they often catch on fire, and this releases air pollutants that can cause respiratory issues, and they also can trap water and become breeding grounds for mosquitoes, which then carry lots of transmissible diseases. So in some places, you can take these tires and they'll chop them all up and use them for things like new tracks, playgrounds. You can use them for footing under horses. They add them into asphalt, and then here in Connecticut, we actually have a plant that burns tires and turns them into energy. Some places deal with their trash by incineration. This is 40% worldwide, so not here, but 40% worldwide just incinerate their trash. What's great is it reduces the volume going to the landfill, so that's our goal. We want less trash going into the landfill. Landfills will last longer, but the problem is air pollutants. So it's a big source of CO2, not as big when you think of some of our other polluting sources, but it's one of the biggest sources of particulate matter, and also has a lot of mercury in it. So these are big human health concerns. Another way that some countries deal with their garbage is through ocean dumping. So you just dump that right into the ocean and it gets taken away and it's no longer your problem. This was prohibited by the Ocean Dumping Act in 1972, but China, Indonesia, and the Philippines and Vietnam still dump a lot of trash, more than the rest of the world combined. So you may be familiar with the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This is a patch off the coast. Here's California right here. So the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is what's in a gyre, where the water is moving in a circular pattern, and it's trapping all those plastic pollutants and causing giant floating islands of trash, which looks like this. A more recent and difficult thing to get rid of is e-waste. So this is electronic wastes from our discarded electronics, which are things like televisions, cell phones, and computers. Contain many hazardous waste materials: lead, arsenic, selenium, antimony, cadmium, chromium, cobalt, mercury, and nickel-cadmium batteries. These are tricky to discard, and you should not just throw these in your regular trash. There's generally e-waste recycling places. We also have industrial waste and hazardous waste. So we've mentioned life cycle analysis and the idea of cradle to grave, which is considering all the materials and energy that are used in the entirety of the lifetime of a product. This was established from the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act of 1976, which wanted to manage how we dispose of hazardous waste. So in some cases, you can recycle those products back into something new, or they need to be treated. You can do that with incineration or oxidation to alter them, or you can just dispose of them, sometimes just in landfills that are constructed to protected groundwater. So with those clay liners. We also have what's called CERCLA, which is the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation Liability Act, or you may have heard the word Superfund. That's what Superfund sites are. And these are created in response to alarming and unacceptable hazardous waste practices and managements, particularly in the 1970s. And you can see we live right in a Superfund hotspot. But thankfully, we don't live in New Jersey. So here is the Superfund sites in Connecticut. There's quite a few. We've got a few up here. In particular, we've got two Superfund sites, 6 sites with toxic release inventories. That's what this right here is, toxic release inventories. This is from a metal plant. So to summarize, there was a lot of information in this, but solid waste is most often disposed of in landfills. Problems with landfills is they can contaminate groundwater and release harmful gases. A sanitary municipal landfill has to have a bottom liner, plastic and or clay, stormwater collection systems to prevent that leachate, and a cap, which is also made of plastic and clay, and then methane collection system. Factors in landfill decomposition include the composition of the trash and conditions needed for microbial decomposition of the waste. They need oxygen. Otherwise, they switch to anaerobic and produce methane. So things that cannot be dumped in a landfill often end up illegally dumped and lead to environmental problems. A big one of these is those rubber tires. Some countries just dump their stuff in the ocean. This leads to the GP, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.